Welcome everyone. Mark Herndon here. We'll be starting at the top of the hour and be back with you in just a couple of minutes to begin. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Mark Herndon. I serve as chairman of the M&A Leadership Council, and on behalf of our entire staff, our faculty and panelists today, and our outstanding alumni and sponsor organizations, I'm delighted that you've joined us here for this important webinar, Essentials for IT Effectiveness Across the Entire M&A Lifecycle. To set the stage for why we wanted to have this conversation today, I want to acknowledge right up front, we're all here because M&A is hard. More specifically, IT and getting IT M&A right throughout the entire M&A lifecycle is one of the most challenging and daunting tasks that any of us as corporate professionals or M&A professionals will ever or have ever faced in our professional careers, for these and many other reasons that you're very well aware of. In our work on the M&A Leadership Council, as we work and advise and coach and train and deliver live deal support for many organizations that are truly best in class in IT M&A, we consistently see teams struggle, even though they have deep subject matter expertise throughout the M&A domain and throughout the IT domain, in deploying and executing well across all phases of the life cycle and keeping an eye on value creation and true business partnering across the entire spectrum. So today we're going to pick out some key highlights. We're going to walk through each of those key phases in brief and share what happens, who does what, but more importantly, we'll focus on the key insights, the key learning, the experiential aspects of helping you go back and execute your next deal extraordinarily well. And for that task, I'm delighted to introduce an outstanding expert panel. Let me just quickly introduce each person. Joining us today, we have Anna Sharoni, who serves as a partner with Fortium Partners and also a senior advisor to M&A Partners, one of our outstanding M&A Leadership Council sponsor organizations. Anna previously served as Chief Security Officer and Chief Privacy Officer with the $48 billion Salmons Financial Group. And Anna has over 16 years of executive level and consulting experience providing strategy, consulting, systems implementation for large institutions in the financial services, insurance, healthcare, and pharmaceutical sectors. She routinely consults with CEOs, CFOs, CSOs, boards, and audit committees on a variety of M&A and cybersecurity issues. So Anna, delighted to have you and your expertise here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Also joining us today is Mark Rapier, Senior Advisor to M&A Partners. Mark brings over 30 years of executive experience throughout the M&A and IT sector in industries including manufacturing and industrial services, healthcare, life sciences, financial services, and insurance. He has deep subject matter expertise in M&A separation and integration management, and he's experienced in application modernization and digital transformation roadmaps, which are instrumental in achieving synergy objectives. He served clients with revenues ranging from 300 million to over 150 billion, and has led multiple global programs delivering applications in over 100 countries. Prior to his service with M&A Partners, he served with PwC, NTT Data Services, Cognizant, and HP Enterprise Services, formerly EDS. So Mark, delighted to have you on the team and look forward to our conversation today with you.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Finally, let me turn to Paul Zarobczyk. Paul serves as Director of Technology and Operations with Mergers and Acquisitions at BMO Harris Bank and BMO Financial Group, and also serves as U.S. Corporate CIO. Over his 20 years in BMO with various technology senior management roles, he is currently serving as the global end-to-end delivery lead for acquisitions, integration, and divestitures for BMO. And in his role as U.S. Corporate CIO, he oversees enterprise-delivered corporate technology solutions with a U.S. impact for legal, compliance, anti-money laundering, and HR. In his prior roles, Paul served as Vice President and Head of the U.S. CIO office at BMO Harris Bank. I'll also point out that Paul joins us as a 2019 distinguished recipient of the Certified M&A Specialist designation. So Paul, welcome. Thank you for your service to the Council and to the greater M&A community here today.
Mark, my pleasure.
With that, let's dive right in. And Anna, I'm going to turn to you first. Now, we often talk as M&A and IT professionals about how do we get farther involved earlier in the process? How do we deliver true strategic value to the corp dev and enterprise deal teams when and where we need? Nowhere is that more true than with cybersecurity. So take over from there. What should we be thinking about with regard to cybersecurity when it comes to the strategy and targeting deal phase?
Well, one of the most important things is to understand the deal. So if you can imagine yourself, you're the Chief Information Security Officer for your company, and you get that call today that your company is going to buy company A. What questions do you need to ask to understand the deal? Because once you understand the deal and all the different components of the deal, then you can start to decide from a cybersecurity perspective, what information do you have to obtain as quickly as possible and accuracy on the information you're containing. And one of the first things you can do, especially if the target company hasn't been read in yet, you can use public records to search for information on the target company. But you have to be very careful on that. One of the things is if you have 20 or 30 people from your company that's been read into this deal, you're all hitting that target company's website. So you want to be very careful about that. You want that well planned and how you're going to be searching their websites themselves, who's going to be doing that. When you're going to link in to look up to see who the Chief Information Security Officer is, or if they don't have them, what does that security team look like? What are the credentials? Those are some of the things you can look at. You can also, hire a third-party company, and you would have this all planned out beforehand, right? You don't want to be doing this the time you're being read into the deal. You want to have that toolbox really well structured. And what you want to do is you may hire a third-party vendor to do a dark web search of the different information of that target company. And also there's tools out there that you can utilize that forensic experts use and the hackers use to look at a company to see, hey, do we have emails out there with the passwords on the dark web? There's tools out there today that you can actually utilize. What is publicly facing from the target company that's already been researched on the dark web? There's companies that have done that for us already. And again, but if you're going to do a deep search, you really need to make sure you have a third party doing it. That's not something you want to venture out and do on your own. So it's very, very important that you have your plan, you have your toolbox, you understand the deal. What are you going to be looking for? And you got to think about with the end in mind. What are you going to be reporting on to the committee? How are you going to do that? How are you going to make sure you know what are the no-goes? What are the concerns you have that you need to identify very quickly?
Excellent. Anna, thank you for that tee-up. And we'll come back to cybersecurity throughout each phase of the process and at the end. So look forward to the dialogue with you. Paul, let's get you involved in the conversation. Talk to us a little bit about the key activities in due diligence.
Sure, Mark, thanks. Well, as we all know, due diligence is not the land of perfect. And, we have to set our expectations and our approach with that in mind. Our insights from the BMO perspective, running many deals and far more due diligence than active deals, is that you need to read the material in the data room, but also outside of the IT domain. Read everything you can get your hands on. We find significant insights from not only the IT portions of the data room, but also, finance, compliance, the board minutes. You can gain a lot of insight from reading things outside of your domain. And also, don't rely completely on the data room materials themselves. As Anna mentioned, there are tools available to you outside of the data room. Google is a free tool. I'm known as the Google expert in our team. My boss is always scratching his head on how did you find out. You can look at CIO interviews from the target company, vendor press releases. You can gain a lot of insight just by being a little creative and putting your detective hat on. You're not going to receive all the information that you need in due diligence. That's one of the things you go in with an expectation. We set that expectation up front. This is where the art of M&A comes into play. We're going to be forced to make some very educated guesses, and that's just a fact of life within the due diligence realm. A key activity for us is to review past and prior deal artifacts, because we find that history repeats itself. We can get a head start on things by looking at a target that looked like another target that we were identifying in the same industry, say a wealth management target in a vertical within banking. They have the same kind of technology stack that typically across different deals. And then you need to connect the end-to-end dots. Reach out to your business partners and other internal support areas. It's easy for us to be in a silo in IT, but we can't exist in a vacuum. We have to exist. We take our lead from our business partners, and by really maintaining that close interaction with our business partners and our corporate support areas during due diligence, they can point us in the right direction on what's important for them, and that makes our job easier in terms of addressing the materiality aspect, which we focus on. Look for material things. Does it really matter what OS they're running? Is there something out there that's really risky for the deal? And then we will have very limited time with the direct conversation with the target. And if you are afforded that opportunity, maximize that time. Really ask pointed questions and ask for metrics and follow-ups, and you'll be well on your way.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you for that great start. And Mark, I want to get you involved in the conversation as well. And sometimes there's a mistake made that you've got a little bit of a gap time between the close of due diligence and the announcement, and nothing is further from the truth. You've really got to maximize that runway during the pre-announced phase. What are some key things that the IT M&A team needs to be focusing on at this juncture?
At this juncture, this is where IT begins to plan the work. You've got a letter of intent in place. So you're beginning to read few more people into the deal, and you begin to say from announcement to whatever day one is, which is going to be decided based on the business drivers, not on the IT preference. You have to begin to plan the work. And one of the most important things to do in this pre-announced phase is to perform your integration discovery, which I like to refer to as post-due diligence diligence. Because there's the idea that there are so many things that the limited number of people who are part of due diligence would be able to tell you because they simply didn't know, or you didn't have time to do the deep dive into some of the data, that you got to go begin to validate your portfolios. I've always been surprised at the firms I've worked with, some of which are global in nature, and you start poking around and you find in Scotland, they've got this software program that nobody in Texas knew about at the corporate headquarters that's critical to delivering a $20 million project in Scotland. So you got to begin to find all that stuff, begin to rationalize think about your portfolio rationalization as you're going to look at it, and begin to put your stakes in the ground as to what you think IT synergy is going to begin to look like, so you can begin to manage the expectations of what IT can save. And that's really sort of the big thing I tend to focus on in this phase is that planning and that diligence work.
Fantastic, Mark. That's a great tee up. And what I want to do in interest of time is go forward to this next slide. As we think about strategy, targeting, diligence, pre-announce, this first module that we're thinking about right now, keep going with the assessments and the practical applications. And Anna, I'll start with you. What are some kind of wrap-up insights on this phase?
Well, one of the things is when you have your no-go, a go and no-go outlined already for the deal. So like in anything, you're going to be looking for lack of security controls, lack of compliance, not being regulatory compliant, those issues, because they're going to be very expensive to do the implementation. You also want to see, have they been hacked? Are they currently being hacked? Are they under attack? Has there been data breaches, or there's evidence of a data breach, but because of lack of logs, you can't tell if there was one, but you have like your experience, like Paul mentioned, your experience. So you're not going to have an inexperienced security person looking at this. You need someone who has an extreme amount of experience so they can make those decisions from the information that they have obtained. So it's very important to have those laid out. Now, we by no means tell anybody that's a go and no go. What we do is we present the evidence and the recommendations of this is the issues, this is the cost, this is why we feel the way we do. And that communication has to be no technical information, no technical words. You got to be very clear on what you found, why you're concerned, and is there any way you can mitigate that concern? And if there isn't, or there's a huge cost to it, you want to make sure you can be able to communicate that. And again, as we mentioned, public records, if you can use that. The other thing is you want to work with your legal team to see if they have any warning letters, right, from the FDA or whoever it may be, from GDPR, because if they have warning letters, there's usually something that's going to follow after that. So you really want to work very closely with your legal team on that. And for your due diligence, make sure you know what reports. I always go for the reports before policy, because reports will show you right away if there's an issue. If they don't have endpoint reports, security endpoint reports, that's a big red flag, right? If they don't have a SOC, a security operations center, that's a big red flag. So there's things you're going to know. If they don't have certain things, it's going to be a big cost to implement the things that you already have in place to protect your company, to bring that company on board.
Makes sense. Really good advice. Paul, pick up from there on diligence and just some final insights here at this phase.
Sure, you have to build your synergy targets in due diligence. We've seen it done at the tail end, and it just never gets done that way. So one of the key requirements we have for our teams is they need to identify synergy targets day one. And we work towards them and report on them. When TSAs are involved, it's very important to set up TSA governance, identifying and what services are required to manage through the TSA program. How do you handle change requests in the TSA, customized service requests? That whole governance piece between both organizations needs to be really locked down. And then this is a point where you build your deal collaboration platform. You can use many different platforms, but number one, identifying the core team and providing them the tools to report on their findings and wrap it up into a nice package that executive management can consume, focusing on materiality and making the decision for go, no go.
Excellent. Mark, finish this section off for us, and then we'll look at pre-close and post-close.
Sounds good. Again, as we talked about on the previous slide, planning the work and confirming your scope to get to day one. I like to spend a lot of time in this phase really talking about IT governance during the deal, because there's a traditional IT governance model about how things move through change gates and they get deployed during maintenance windows and all this other stuff that in large part gets tossed out during a deal, because IT is running more projects, more large projects at once than they typically do. And the speed with which you have to move means you sort of have to begin to think at a higher level and move a little quicker. And if you don't think through how you want to govern, to make sure you're really touching on the important things that you're doing so that things are deployed in the right sequence and all the dependencies are made, you really got to get there. and understanding your future states. As Anna said before, understand the deal thesis, what you're trying to accomplish. And it's not only understanding IT's deal thesis, but it's understanding your business partners' outcomes too, because IT is going to have synergy targets. But if your procurement folks have a target to implement, to improve the supply chain, that's going to drive requirements back to IT. So all of your business partners are going to be feeding you requirements during this phase as well that you have to accommodate into, in addition to what you're trying to accomplish.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And, as we transition to this next phase, we're going to ask Mark to walk us through the pre-close to post-close phase. Obviously, heavy lifting for everyone, but in particular, the IT M&A team. And for our participants with us today, what I'd encourage you to do is use that questions dialog box on their control panel. Please be sure and submit questions for our outstanding panelists today. And we'll be ending up with about 15 minutes or so of Q&A from the submitted questions. So please lob in your questions for this outstanding group. Mark, with that, how do we get these two phases right? Critical, essential efforts that need to be extremely well executed throughout. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, there's so much you could unpack here that we don't have time to unpack. So I was just going to go after a few of the key ones that if you sort of set foundations, everything else becomes a little bit easier to navigate when you're doing. In that pre-close phase, which means it's announced, it's public, everybody knows what's going on, you're marching toward a date that you're hoping for approvals on from shareholders and government agencies where appropriate. This is where you really begin to expand and build out your team. And building teams in an M&A deal is harder than normal because you're blending people from two organizations, you're blending some external support folks, and everybody's going to start working they're going to want to start running at 100 miles an hour, but you got to build the team, you got to make sure they're connected. And the other thing I like to do early on is really make sure you focus on what the testing strategy and the cutover planning is going to look like, so that as you begin to build work, you test and you pre-test and you do your unit test in accordance, so that when you're ready to do your cutovers, your testing is where it needs to be. And I'll spend a little bit more time in this pre-close phase around application access governance, because you're going to see a lot of people from target companies and legacy companies are going to say, well, I need access to this and I need access to that, but you're still two separate companies. So you really have to ratchet those requests down, dial them back, have a process for how you're really going to control who gets access to the other organization's applications and data pre the deal close. So application access pre-close is very important, and post-close, it's also a challenge too, because post-close, you're immediately going to start dropping in a new organizational structure. So you might have an application in one company that now is being managed by somebody in the other company. How do you get them access? How do you get them the appropriate training? In some industries, you have to prove certified training before you can give them access to it, like in pharmaceuticals for certain systems. You have to demonstrate that the people have been appropriately trained before you can give them access to the systems and the data. And application access often turns into a mad scramble at the end to get right if you don't spend some time at the beginning planning on it. And so that's where you sort of get into, and that's all the pre-close stuff. Then you get into the day 100 stuff. And I say it's a day approximately 100, because you got to think about when your first tax filings are due. And what's all the work you got to do to get to that first set of tax filings? And are there any other cliffs you've got to get to? One client I rolled off of recently, one of the big day 100 items we planned for was labor negotiation contracts that were going to start. So you had to begin to think about how you're going to combine the data and move into a set of labor negotiations that were going to start basically 45 days after the deal close. So you got to begin to think about all those things that are going to happen in that first 90 to 100 to 121 days, and make sure you're there and you're ready. And this is also where, for the longer term value, you begin to lock down your transformation roadmap for the big buckets in IT synergy.
Right.
And then, as Paul mentioned, it's about managing the TSA exits, because they're going to have multiple shutdown dates for various components. based on system availability. Sometimes it's based on regulatory requirements and when you can move people and operations based on permissions from various local governments around the world. And managing your TSA exit to the end of it is where is obviously something that's important, is going to drag on for quite a while. And
Yep.
This is also when you begin to transition to the more traditional IT governance models.
Great.
Tighten things up.
Mark, excellent overview, and you're right. We could spend 2 days just on this one slide here, and we actually will have an opportunity to provide more insight in an upcoming full M&A Leadership Council training event on this same topic. So stay tuned for that. Before we go to the long-term value creation phase, Mark, continue just the experiential insights. What are the key ahas and takeaways? And why don't you clear yours off, and then Anna, let's come back to you, because as we mentioned, cyber is inherently important throughout every phase of the process.
I'll start with a few. You'll see the things I have written there, but I'm going to sort of focus at a higher level. One of them is to always keep your eyes on the prize. You're going to be constantly making tactical decisions throughout this process. And if you have a choice, you should always try and pick the one that's going to enable the long-term value creation. It's a subtle decision factor in there. It's not about what's quickest, easiest. You know, you might choose to do something that's a little harder to do something because it enables what you're trying to accomplish. Stay connected to your business partners because they're also running, 100 miles an hour downhill, trying to hit their objectives and their targets and their goals. And you've got to help them get their synergy. RT is key to a lot of them achieving their synergy targets as well. Pay attention to your team. This is a lot of work and it's happening fast. And you've got a blended team that's never worked together before between your external folks and the people from the two companies that are involved. And all of them are sitting around these tables knowing that some of them won't be around when this is over. And if you don't think about the team dynamics and keep them engaged in what you're trying to get them to do for you, it's easy for the team to devolve and become productive. Be adaptable. I used to say be agile, but then agile project management took over and gave it a completely different meaning, but it's just be prepared to flex. Dwight Eisenhower once said that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And that really is very true in deals. And the other thing is, as you're thinking about applications and everything, don't lose the secret sauce.
Yeah.
The reason you're buying these folks, because there's a lot of business rules and intelligence and logic that's built into your systems and how they process data and transactions, that if you're not careful, you can lose that data because it's embedded in the systems, and sometimes the people who support the systems have forgotten that it's there. And if somebody's really heavy into artificial intelligence, there's a lot of business rules that no human ever wrote that you need to make sure you don't lose.
Great insight.
And that's sort of where I'll stop and pass it back to Anna.
So, Mark, that's a great lead in. Don't lose the secret sauce. But there's, from the security perspective, is you really have to heighten your security awareness on the technical side and on the user side. And also you got to know what's leaving the network, right? From making sure that you understand for your data loss prevention program, make sure it's where it needs to be so you can monitor information that's leaving or even coming in, because you really want to make sure if someone's sharing information they shouldn't be sharing. And if they are, right, and the bad actors get wind, and there are ones that are just looking at M&A deals, right? They go, oh, this is a great opportunity. Their guards are down, right? The target company and the buying company. So you really got to make sure your house is in order from the technical side. And again, we always remember your employees are your first line of defense. So make sure they are trained well to look at phishing attacks, because you might be getting more bombarded with very sophisticated phishing attacks because now you're a target from the bad actor. So you have to really make sure you have your house in order, the target company has their house in order, and you're able to monitor the information coming in and leaving the company. Daily notice from the target company. So if they have SOC reports, we're going to say this target company's in pretty good shape, right? They have endpoint reports, they have security operation reports. You want to be part of those reports that they get. You want to be able to review those, because maybe like has been shared, that you may be the CISO that may be staying, the Chief Information Security Officer, and the other individuals from that security team are feeling, well, we're not going to be staying for whatever reason, so their eye is not on the ball right now. And so you need to make sure you and your team have the eye on the ball, and by reviewing those reports, being part of the alerts that are being issued, because some alerts you need to take immediate action on it, especially you see admin accounts being created, and we can go very deep into the weeds with this.
Yeah.
The other thing is cybersecurity, very important on both sides, right? So with cybersecurity, because during this time, you're probably a targeted attack by a bad actor. So ransomware is probably going to run wild, and then through phishing attacks and stuff, because they're going to try to do their best to cause havoc. So what you want to do is make sure you're prepared on both sides. What is your cybersecurity insurance requirements? What are theirs? What does their incident response plan look like? What does your incident response plan look like? And is your team on board with their incident response in case they're hit and maybe the right individuals are no longer there to support an incident response and don't forget about business continuity and DR.
Fantastic, Anna. Thank you so much. No, this is great. And we're seeing some fantastic questions come in. So keep those questions coming through the chat, or excuse me, the question dialog box in your control panel. And we'll save about 15 minutes at the end. But Paul, one thing that often gets overlooked, at the end of post-close, we have fatigue, we have 100 other programs and initiatives going on in the entire IT portfolio, resources get drawn off, people get tired, distracted, et cetera. And yet that's the very time that we really need to rescope, replan, and relaunch around those long-term value capture initiatives, many of which fall directly on the shoulders of IT from an optimization, synergy capture, and business enablement standpoint. So today we won't take as long on the final phase, long-term value creation, but talk to us from your experience about what are some things that we can keep in mind to really get this critical phase right?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, you need to start your synergy planning and due diligence, and work that all the way through the life cycle. It's so important to manage as you learn things about the target organization during due diligence and the other phases. Things change, but you need to set those targets and monitor them and make sure that they're baked into the integration plans at the tail end.
I think we just lost Paul. Maybe April or Noel, you could reach out to Paul and see if he's able to rejoin. So let's do this. What I want to do is go to a couple of questions while we're waiting for Paul to rejoin. He's got some incredible insights, and we want to get to Spotlight on Success about BMO here in just a minute. But in the interim, let's go to one of the questions, because I think cybersecurity has been left out of the M&A conversation for far too long. And I just want to tee this up by saying what commonly is a concern that may not be expressed. So here's the question that Manuel has asked. Going into due diligence, should we just assume that the target company has already been hacked or breached and they just don't know it yet? What do you think?
Yeah, well, every CISO always assumes, a good CISO will always assume we've been hacked and breached, even your own company, right? So you're going to really have your eye on the ball. So on a target company, depending on what the deal is, right? If you're purchasing the whole company, definitely you have to look at that, because you really want to make sure those endpoints are clean, right? And you want to do your due diligence of looking to see if the bad actors have been there. have left artifacts or are still there, which in many cases they could be still there because you've looked at some reports or you've asked for reports and they haven't been there. And that's going to even make you more hyped to looking at, hey, this company has been, attacked. What do we need to do? What do we need to search on and do that? Absolutely. And even when I do assessments, I always look at companies outside an M&A engagement that they have been hacked. So we're looking at the right things. We're looking not just, are they following policy and procedures? We really want to make sure their endpoints are clean.
Fantastic. And Paul, delighted to have you back. That just happens, no worries. So why don't we go ahead and wrap up on long-term value creation. What's 2 or 3 other things just to help us really think correctly about the importance and executing well in this phase? Paul, back to you.
I think you need to rely on your procurement and supplier management team and decide, which suppliers are no longer needed, which you're going to retain if they provide critical services. And then the other option is, are you going to retain a supplier or a software or application provider at a reduced level? And when in the process is that not going to be needed at the full level? And the procurement folks are best suited to work through the contractual and implications of that. And then we have to assess the ability, timing, and impact to migrate to our contracts.
Right.
So we have to get legal involved. Are there exit requirements from the target company's agreements? Those are very important. It's heads down, busy work, but it's very key to a successful transition.
Well, that's a really good setup, and I'll give you a chance just to kind of take a deep breath, and let me provide a little bit of setup here as to why we wanted you to continue to elaborate, Paul, on your team's insights and learnings. As I mentioned, so many times subject matter experts are, deep in M&A, deep in IT, and yet the team has difficulty executing. Yet when we first met, your immediate boss, Tony DeCamara, in an M&A Leadership Council workshop a few years ago, we knew that your team had some really unique skill sets and capabilities that, quite frankly, deserve some time to think about how we can share some of that learning with others. So let's plan to take maybe, Paul, 7 minutes or so, if you can. Just give us a very high-level flyby of who BMO is, your deal count experience, and then let's get right into it. How do you do IT M&A at your shop?
Well, I lost my connection again. Can you hear me?
We can, and maybe just go off camera for a little bit, and there you go. Now you're back. Great, no worries.
All right, great. So the overview on BMO's largest acquisition, we purchased the Marshall and Isley Bank in 2010. We tripled in size overnight, and we became a SIFI bank, which is a significantly influencing financial institution in the United States. Pushed us into stress testing, very enhanced regulatory requirements. AML became a focus. Cybersecurity became a focus. We integrated 3 operating groups, including our personal and commercial bank, wealth management.
Yeah, having trouble with Paul here, so he'll rejoin in just a second. But let's take an opportunity, and Paul, when you get back on audio, just let us know, and we'll let you finish off this case study. In the meantime, I'm going to go to all right. Very good. Thank you, sir. Keep going. You're doing great.
All right. Our M&A experiences, we've done over 40 acquisitions since 1984. I mentioned M&I, which tripled our size. GE Transportation Finance was a $10 billion acquisition a couple of years ago, where we purchased the large equipment financing arm of GE. It was a co-mingled deal with another portion of that business going to another acquirer, which provided a lot of complexity from a data perspective. And I'm in charge of the Center of Excellence, and we've developed significant playbooks for each stage of the M&A lifecycle, from target identification through.
That sounds great. So I'm going to click forward to this slide just to give folks a little bit of an indication of the complexity and the sophistication. Just 30 seconds at most on this project, and then we'll get right into the lessons learned.
Yep. So 85 systems converted, 387 individual projects. About half of those were pure IT. 1,500 program resources, meaning people, 20,000 plus months of effort. We had 62, I think almost 70 playbooks when we went back and counted. 5,000 tasks and milestones. We converted 11 million records, did 3 million customer mailings, 100,000 total training hours, and we onboarded about 75,000 new mobile banking customers at the time.
Amazing data points.
With a huge,
yeah. Congratulations.
And we did it big bang, so it all happened on one day.
Fantastic, and that's both inspiring and very frightening. So congratulations, well done. That says a lot. Let's go on to the next slide and really click down into some of the key issues that you need to keep in mind to do IT M&A well.
So through those large acquisitions I mentioned, we've identified 4 major root causes of issues, and that's insufficient understanding and documentation of your own end-to-end processes. So in between deals, we are busy at work mapping out our processes. We're working with our business partners to do so. Having those in place makes it so much easier to plug in someone else's processes from a target perspective and make that a more seamless process. The other key issue root cause was decisions being made late or going back and being revisited, eating up time, and just that scope creep to meet the conversion date. You need to make decisions early and stick to them. And as Mark mentioned, testing and walkthroughs of contingency plans not thorough or robust enough. I cannot overestimate or emphasize the importance of making sure your contingency plans are in place. And then lack of subject matter experts. You have to pick the right people to be involved. I know that's easier said than done. It can't be done off the side of your desk because your top people are actually running your business. But you have to have those SMEs, the end-to-end knowledge of the processes, systems, and all of your products.
We're going to come back to the resourcing piece in just a minute, but Paul is spot on, and I just so resonated with all of these root causes here. And what I'd like to do on this next slide is just focus on the scope aspects of getting IT M&A right. We'll pick up some more on the resourcing and the expertise during the Q&A portion.
Sure. Scope, well, scope is the enemy, and it has to be managed. You really have to manage scope creep, and as Mark mentioned, change management, strong change control board is essential. You have to have people that understand the eyes, have their eyes on the prize, and they have to be decision makers who will make the decision and stick to them. You also have to identify your scope complexities early in the process. Are you going to just simply connect the target into your infrastructure and run them standalone? Are you going to integrate them with their connectivity, but into your systems as well, kind of a hybrid approach? Are you going to convert like we did M&I, purely convert them over onto your target systems, which is our guiding principle, is that all BMO systems are targets, and you have to have a very strong business case for that to be otherwise. And then rebuild and reconstruct. This is the method we chose for the GE equipment finance acquisition. They had extremely complex technology built purely for the customer experience. That it started off as lift and shift, but we had to rebuild and reconstruct. And those are the 4 things that need to be decided early on. And then obviously, from the previous slide, you can see the complexity of something like an M&I or a BMOTF. You need to have a professionally run PMO. It has to be a key. The administration of the program is one thing, doing the work and heavy lifting is another thing. You need your IT team seconded full-time to the program. The program should choose the key IT folks from the target and from internally. And regardless if you have multiple CIOs within your organization, if you have portfolio CIOs, the program should choose the IT folks because we have the better vision into what the end result should be. And
Great.
then we have to watch for the inflection point, which is there's a point in the program where things exponentially increase in urgency and activity, and some people just can't handle it. And you have to really, as Mark mentioned, keep in touch with your team, keep track of how people are performing, and you have to make some hard decisions sometimes along the course of the as
Spot
that
on, Paul.
inflection point
Yeah,
is reached.
great advice for all of us. And panelists, this is a good turning point. Let me go ahead and shift to the Q&A portion. We've got some good time remaining and really want to maximize the Q&A. So panel, with your permission, let's jump right in. And Mark Rapier, I'm going to go to you first with a question that's come in from Bill. And it's basically about resourcing and expertise. He says, are there things you can do to prioritize and get needed internal experts which are already assigned to internal projects, meaning their day jobs, other than hiring supplemental contractors, and which may not have the needed internal expertise? Boy, that's a common dilemma every deal, right? Mark, what do you say?
It definitely is. And I think there's, I'll step one step back from this. One of the first things that's going to happen when you move into the deal phase is you're going to look at your IT projects portfolio. Some projects you have that are scheduled to start won't start. Some projects you have that are in flight will stop. Other projects you have will have their scope changed, and some of them will have their dates shifted to accommodate target dates for the migration. But the need to get internal expertise is key. But you're going to have a blend. You're going to have some of the internal expertise is from the target company, not the acquiring company. So you have to make sure you get internal expertise from both sides so that you understand what you're moving and you move it well. And you do want some external expertise as well, because this is an opportunity to begin to plant the foundations for synergy later on. So you look at your portfolio, and then for some of the folks who have ongoing day-to-day operations requirements, what you're going to look to your external resources to provide backfill resources for them, so that maybe they can only spend 10 to 15% of their time instructing the person in the day job so they can be focused on the project. You move it forward that way, but it's a balancing act, because you're always sort of managing all those stresses from multiple directions.
Excellent overview, Mark. Thanks for that. Anna, I'm going to come to you next with the question that Tim has raised. He says, if the target company doesn't have good DLP prevention, data leakage prevention, would you require this to be implemented in post-close prior to deal announce? So as a deal point going forward is what he's saying.
Yeah, well, one of the things is DLP implementations, what I've done, many of them are very complex, time and resource intense. And I can't, that's a 2-hour conversation right there with that. But what you need to do is, if they don't, and the other thing is, you're not going to integrate them into your DLP, because you're really going to keep them segmented off your network, right? Until you've gotten to do your additional due diligence to make sure their systems aren't going to cause your systems harm. So at this point, they're segmented off, I would hope, right? For their DLP, they don't have something in place. There's certain things and tools that they may already have that you can turn on. Now you're not going to get the whole benefit, but there's certain things that you may want to look for, like on certain emails, you might be able to do some DLP, not really pretty, on certain keywords and different things like that. So there's tools you can implement, turn on certain functions of those tools that they may already have and utilize that. But remember, you're going to get a lot of false positives, and you're going to have a resource to review those reports. But a DLP program itself is very complex to implement.
All right,
excellent job. Great question.
It really is. Thanks, Tim and Bill. And I want to open this up to the panel, and maybe Mark and Paul, you could take the first crack at this. This is really an IMO related question from our good buddy Dan. And Dan says, what advice would you have for an IMO, and again, Integration Management Office, right, IMO, trying to set the stage for the IT work stream to be successful? So you've got enterprise responsibilities if you're leading the IMO, and your IT, while deep subject matter experts, may not be as sensitive to or tuned into the deal thesis, as each of you addressed early on, or the business partner requirements across the organization. How do you set the stage as an IMO lead for IT work stream to be successful? Mark or Paul, who wants to start that?
I can take it. I think we can revisit another topic that we brought up previously, and that is the IMO needs to lead the change control tone. And the greatest help you give your IT department is to manage that scope and help manage things and keep us focused on the prize. And we found that to be very essential, especially in the large GE integration we did, given the fact that we had to shift from lift and shift to rebuild and reconstruct in the middle of the program after we learned things. You know, scope could have gone rampantly out of control, and the IMO's where the change control board sat was at the IMO level for all IT change control. I think it made us ultimately successful in the end.
Yeah, Mark, what do you say to that?
That's spot on. And the thing I would add is sort of a layer on top of what happens in the IMO is that that's where you stay connected to what's going on in the rest of the business to understand what they're going through. Because if somebody's got to start and a lot of this really comes down to what's going on in procurement and what's going on in some of the other things. Because if your procurement folks are trying to consolidate contracts with, for example, Staples, you have two contracts with Staples, you're trying to merge them into one to get some immediate synergies. Well, that's going to drive IT work in both the legacy and the acquiring and the target company systems.
Yeah,
to be able to support that stuff. So that's really where a lot of that connection comes as well.
Excellent, Mark, thanks. And your audio just went out for just a second. I promise I wasn't trying to interrupt you, but you're back and all good. Audio's great, and everybody's doing fantastic. Let me kind of click down on that too, because it's such a hard issue. I would say that this goes right back to the life cycle and the framework, and all work streams, especially IT, needs to be wired in and a deeply integral part of the enterprise IMO process. Certainly, you've got other processes and governance routines and disciplines, as each of you have addressed, but you've got to be on the same page, running the same plays, the same milestones, the same reporting. And IMO is your friend if you're on IT, because nobody else is going to be able to articulate the challenge of the resourcing, the portfolio management, the budget, et cetera, at the deal team, at the steering committee level, than the IMO. So stay closely connected to IMO as your team, but make sure you're executing against their game plan, cadence, processes, et cetera. So it's very much a two-way street. We've got some other great questions here. We've probably got about another 5 minutes for questions. And Paul, I'm going to send this next one to you. And it's really about roadblocks, roadblocks in IT integration. You're doing a rebuild and reconstruct. You've got a challenging milestone, budget and resources in place, and all of a sudden something blows up. Another program, a curveball, the proverbial roadblock. Help us with that. How do you get unstuck? What do you do?
Well, we have the formal program structure of an integration, and in our everyday life, we have our formal networks, the corporate hierarchy, taking things up the chain, so to speak, in terms of breaking roadblocks. But we also have informal networks as individuals, and the depth and breadth of those will vary based on your tenure within your organization and how involved you are on a day-to-day basis. But you have to learn to leverage your informal networks. And we find this in due diligence, right? There's the org chart of who's in charge. And then when you talk to people, you actually know and identify who holds the power to get things done. And it may not be a direct reflection of the organizational chart. So developing those informal networks is very important. Our philosophy is that any team that's held up for a day loses a week's worth of effort. And
wow.
we've observed that over time, and it's up to leadership at the IT level, at the IMO level, to clear the roadblocks. And the leveraging of the informal networks will occur at every level in the program. I've been fortunate in my 20 years at BMO with all of the different roles I've assumed. And we have a great deal of long tenured folks at BMO. I'm very fortunate and to have a very well developed informal network. I view that as much as I can during problem management. That's key.
Yeah, really good. That resonates with me 100%. Anna, we just got a question in from Jane, and I think it's a very common concern and question. She asked, what would you do if the target co is hit with a ransomware attack prior to deal closing? You haven't ever seen that, have you?
No.
What would you say?
I've seen ransomware attacks. Yeah. I would pray. No, I'm just joking. Well, you know, the one thing is you got to understand ransomware attacks are just not now they're not just encrypting data. Before they have encrypted your data, they've grabbed your data, you know, and they have your data. And so if you don't pay the ransom, and that's a whole other conversation, they're also going to threaten, let me rephrase it. They will also threaten you with exposing the attack with your data going public on the internet. So that's a very bad situation. So what you have to do for that is, again, earlier that we talked about, looking at their incident response plan. And if they don't have an incident response plan, they haven't done tabletops for ransomware attacks, and they don't have after action reports, that's something you got to be right on the ball for, to say, okay, if they do get hit, how bad will this be? And the chances are, depending on their security posture, it's going to be really bad, because the bad actor's probably already been sitting there. So you really then want to really look at their backups. So you may not be able to prevent the attack, but you can really quickly look at their backups, make sure their backups are secure, make sure that they can recover their backups. And that's the worst case of a ransomware attack, is your backups have been encrypted. And they might find that they've already been encrypted. So yeah, it's not a good situation, but you can get through it, and it's very costly, and that may be a deal breaker. But you got to understand what is your game plan if they do get hit with ransomware, because that usually comes through a phishing attack, and that's already been sitting there.
Wow. Thank you. Really important. Mark, we've got time for one more, and I'm going to throw it your way. It's a really important one because we've all struggled with this in the context of IT M&A. It's about historical data. What are the most common approaches for preserving historical data? Natalie's asked a great question. What do you say to that?
Preserving your data is key. A lot of it's going to depend upon what your application strategy is going to be. If your target company is going to retain access to the applications that's housing that data, that buys you some time on how you're going to begin to move it. But in terms of data management, it's not only the historical data, but it's how do you begin to build your data depending upon the quantity. You could do a store, you could do a mart, you could do a lake, you could do an ocean, however much data you have. But it's the idea of taking data from whatever the legacy system is determined to be, but you have to get it somewhere, and that process, you have to transform it so that you can actually report against, you can align it to the data and what the new target system is, so that you can actually look at the data in total. Because you've got historical accounting transactions in two systems, but if you want to bring them together and say this is what it looks like, you have to be able to transform the records themselves. So there is a strategy around how you're going to do that. Typically happens well after a close in day 100, so you have to maintain some applications for a while, even if they're non-productive. But thinking through how you're going to manage that data and push it through, and make sure and if you're a carve out, it's making sure you only get the data you're entitled to. That's another challenge that I've also inquired.
Absolutely, can really resonate with that. And I'm sure each of you on the panel, as well as on the participant roster today, can. Well, listen, I know we could go on for hours with this expert panel. Thank you all. Great insights, great real practical and applicable ideas and expert coaching that we can apply. As we wrap up our hour here together, everyone, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the M&A Leadership Council. For the last 10 years, we've done the best in professional development in the M&A world. We've trained over 4,000 executives, over 700 companies, some just starting out, some with over 700 completed acquisitions when they started getting involved in the council. And yet, regardless of the skill level, the expertise, it's all about the real world experience, just like you've heard today, from trusted delivery resources, corporate M&A practitioners, just like each of you on the webinar today. And we do that both online and in person, but the hallmark is the interactive, the lessons learned, the practical insights that you can take back and apply immediately to your situation. I know this 1 hour today on IT effectiveness across the M&A lifecycle is far too short, but we want to encourage you to check out the upcoming training event on this same topic. Many of the same faculty members here. This is a completely redesigned and all new content. We're very excited about delivering this. It's a total of 10 hours of instruction spread out over 3 days, October 13th through 15th, a very convenient online format that has worked well for many council alumni and participants over the last several months as we've pivoted online with everybody else. Now, just clicking down in that agenda one level deeper, you will see that everything that we've talked about end to end throughout the entire M&A lifecycle will be deconstructed in a lot more specific detail. You'll end up with instructional guides, you'll end up with process flows, but more importantly, you'll end up with an opportunity to talk with your colleagues across the world, across industry, with various levels of experience and industry applications, to roll up your sleeves in IT M&A. And what does it take to really get each of these sections and phases accomplished well with an eye on value creation and business partnering, to include some of the hardest things of all. Cybersecurity will be embedded throughout. How do we deliver business partnering, customer experience, employee experience? And a hallmark of each day will be the interactive exercises, the workouts, ending with a comprehensive case study that is a very live, real case study with names and companies and brands that you've experienced and know all about. But we're going to take it from a standpoint of some major IT business decisions, and how would you respond as you are the IT M&A lead, driving the work stream to support the business best and hit the business case best. So it'll end on a real high note, and these are all great events. You know, there's a unique promotion going on now. Just enter this code in the registration field on the M&A Leadership Council website. The link here in the blue box will be live when you get the download PDF, or just visit us at macouncil.org. Go to the training calendar and look for IT effectiveness. We can't wait for this program. It'll be excellent, and it'll be a real highlight for each of you. So hope you can join us. That's just one of 5 outstanding workshops and training events that we've got lined up throughout the rest of the year: due diligence, integration, program management, and we'll end the year with divestitures and carve-outs, and we look forward to another year of even more innovative content and engagement strategies next year. So please be sure and get involved, tell your colleagues, and let us know what we can do to assist in the meantime as you're looking at those opportunities. So again, to our distinguished expert panelists, thank you for the tremendous insights and experiences that you've shared here today. We look forward to learning with you more in the future and at the Art of M&A IT Effectiveness, October 13th through 15th. And to our outstanding partner and sponsor organizations, M&A Partners, Willis Towers Watson, and many, many others, thank you for all you're doing. And to each of our alumni, thanks for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you again at an upcoming M&A Leadership Council event. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Mark. Take care.